let's start this game of Urbanization. Now, part of it is, I didn't hand out all the money to begin with. Everybody starts out with $8. The very first decision each player has to make is where they want to start. Now, this is not a hard decision in any sense. There's not a lot to differentiate the terrain, except it can hold one or two locations in it. And then beyond that, well, price as things go on. But the very first thing is, well, you don't want to be stuck off on an edge because it's harder to expand. You want to make sure that you have capacity to go in any direction, so whoever comes in after you doesn't really, can't cut you off and block you out. That's actually a big deal. In two players, a lot of the board is missing, and it's actually pretty easy to cut the other person to a limited amount of territory. So blue will place their house here. Remember, you start with a house, and they get to put this money marker. Now, this is kind of interesting. They don't want to necessarily put it near themselves. So, on the other hand, if they put it in one of these other central locations, it's probably going to let somebody else move it. So they're going to throw it way over here, which makes this a less interesting space. What they might want to do is actually throw it kind of closer to them. So here, they're not going to get this space, but it kind of creates a disincentive for that space, maybe. And likewise, red will, red can do a similar type of move by grabbing this space, and again, the house goes down. And where do we want things? Well, we'll make it uglier. See, but here's the problem. If I make it ugly for this space, other things become interesting, maybe, like this space. And also in 4 players, the board isn't going to be balanced. If 3 players take the 3 central good spaces, well, somebody else is going to screw someone. Chances are, though, that the safest move is to present them with an equal opportunity to screw whomever they like. And I don't think I'd suggest this in 4 for this simple fact. This can be a big deal. Now here's the question. Whom do I want screwed, right? If I put the big money here, well, that doesn't necessarily prevent someone from going here. On the other hand, there's a certain attraction to putting the money. So the money here, if someone goes in here, they have cheap spaces in either direction without a likely competition in one of the 2 directions, and they could place here. So I'm saying this is not a bad move because there's 2 big money spaces here. And green is going to agree with that and say, yeah, you're right. And I'm going to take that space. You don't have to pay for these starting spaces. And now green has $2 signs to put. They don't put them near themselves, of course. What they're going to do is kind of clutter up the extra two property spaces. And now they're in kind of a nice place. And in a sense, they've made things a little cheaper on blue as well by not filling up a couple of the places that are closest to them there. They don't want to fill this one because blue might head that way, if they leave it kind of open. A lot of that kind of thinking. Now, I'm going to give the mayor card to the blue player just to remind and get in the habit of saying the first player has the mayor card. Technically, they don't have it on this first action of the game. Now, let's look at our sequence. Okay, we all have to pick a character, and it starts with him. I'll come back after I make the selections and talk about what the reasoning was. I want to explore the game a little bit. The first time I played, I took the farmer as my first pick with the thought of I would maximize my grain production. It worked fairly well, and I want to investigate, because the second time I didn't do that and my wife didn't do that, I want to investigate if it is actually a viable strategy, because on the second play it seemed weak to my mind, so I went with something else. That something else was the foreman. which produces a lot of work orders for you as you start, well, once at least, when you place, when you start building up an industry. Having a lot of cubes is of some value, especially with certain other technologies. Whether or not I'll get to those technologies, we don't know. But that seemed like an interesting option. The third option, the one that people seem to love, is the professor, who gets you a couple of technologies. Collecting up the technologies. Now here's the thing. If you grab a bunch of technologies early in the game, you can clear it out so nobody else wants to play in the technology sphere at all. And you can kind of make it your own private playground. The professor is good at that because he can jump in and grab the first one and get 2 of them for nothing and just say, haha, do you want to pay $1, you know, for less than I got? But, and an action, of course. The action is actually the bigger thing generally. But I don't know that wiping out one layer is all that impressive and making people pay to skip over it. But if you manage to get a couple of these, it does become your own little private playground. Nobody else is probably going to pay a significant amount of money. Money's kind of tight in the game. There's a lot of constraints on you. There's money, there's food, there's manpower, there's work possibility, etc. It all kind of plays in. There's the territory on the board. And you really have to kind of carefully balance what you're doing. Dominating in one is going overboard. You know, if you work too hard in one direction, you might find yourself without the perfect mix that you kind of need. And somebody else might be able to squeeze closer to that. The final one, this guy was left with a real question. I went between... So the mill worker here, I was mistaken when I explained him, because it doesn't explain it on the card, but he has to take a trade action in order to be used, which means you could just buy the grain. You're not really getting a free action out of it. I thought maybe he gave you that, in which case he'd be very potent. Instead, he just gives you a couple grain without having to pay. Now, the farmer has to do some work to get his grain. He has to buy grain in order to plant it, and then plant it. So that's 2 actions right there. If he wants to increase his grain yield even more, he might want to buy a property or something. Once you get your grain up to a high level though, you're probably set for the game in terms of that. So you can play around and keep it balanced, but you're probably in pretty good shape actually. And it's a victory point generator, so it is kind of an interesting choice. I went with the industry boss because that lets him grab a factory early. By the way, there's no luck in this game at all, except maybe, you know, seating position or whatever. These guys come out in order and always the same. Nothing gets randomly discarded. One gets discarded each turn, but it's not at random. And all your decisions are really, you know, kind of like an 18xx game, completely deterministic in a multiplayer environment. Okay, so we've settled all the things. Yellow wants to start off by buying himself some grain. What am I going to need for grain? Well, maybe I want to buy property first. So if I buy property, I need 1, 2, 3, 4 grain. If I want to buy 4 grain, it'll cost me 2, 4, 5, 6 bucks. That's a lot of money. Let's just buy 3 grain. I can plant all this anyway. Yeah. 3 grain. Do I just want to buy 2 grain for 2 bucks? Because then if I don't buy property, I get 3 more grain. I'll buy the 3 grain. I'm going to go big for 4 bucks. This was more or less what I thought would work. And I was less than impressed with it. That's the first action. Over here, this guy, what's he doing? Well, grabbing lots of work markers is a useful thing. Now, there's a good chance the bakery's not going to happen. Unfortunately, you have to be completely aware of all these different technological advances to be able to understand the game. So the first 2 are the seed drill and the spinning jenny. Well, the spinning jenny gives you points if you have the weaving mill, which I don't know where that is, but it's not up yet. And the seed drill gives you a grain for free. A grain for free is kind of nice. Getting that technology might be kind of cool. A grain for free feeds my first player. On the other hand, and I could force the professor to jump ahead and to buy maybe the iron plow and steam engine by doing that. Steam engine changes orange to gray, though. That's a nice combination. So my foreman, if I start producing lots of orange cubes, I'm going to kind of want to do that. So I don't want to buy the technology. What do I want? I don't terribly need to use him right now, although, you know, it's possible that 3 other players could go and take, you know, 3 of the orange cube spaces. I still should be able to grab myself 4 orange cubes. So that's not really a big deal for me. Do I want to pay to jump ahead and just grab the technology that I want? I wish I had the... By the way, you can have multiple action chits on here that you just started, so that you could, like, you know, send 2 guys, have 2 different investor actions going so that you grab everything. What about that iron plow? What does that do? You can sow more on building grounds, but not apparently on the farmer. I think I'm going to grab the technology. I want that technology. It's going to cost me $1. I'll grab the steam engine. And now this will give me an extra victory point if I get the sawmill, which, you know, I'm probably not going to get, but whatever, you know. So that puts us over to the professor. Now, the professor is going to get kind of boned out of his choice if he doesn't take it right away. He's afraid somebody will take one of these 2 and then he'll have to pay. So he'll take an action to grab the spinning jenny, which says all of his orange factories produce at least 2 work orders when he chooses produce goods. That'll be important if he gets one of these 2. So that makes that an appealing choice for him. And then the seed drill gives him an extra grain each time. So he's got a couple of nice things. Now, he used up his ability. No one else has. The industry boss could just grab a position at this point. I don't know if that's terribly interesting to him. He's got property problems. He's worried that he's going to get sealed in. So he's got 2 directions he could go in. This way cuts a player off, so I am going to pay $1. I hate to do this this early, but I'm going to grab myself a piece of property. I got to be careful because some of these things create victory points without you knowing. So, for example, when you do a production action, that gives you victory points. And it's not very easy. I believe it's listed on here, but it's not very easy to see them all. And with me kind of playing fast and loose, I may not be in a good position. Now, what would I like to prevent? I'm heading this way. I've got the jump on this. If I put this here, I think I'm kind of making it more likely that I get that. Alternatively, I could put it here and make it more likely I can get that. That seems more likely. Okay. Of course, red's very likely to head down this way, but whatever. So that's one time around. We go to the second. I got a bunch of grain, but I may have more important things to do at this point. So right now I can plant 3 grain. I would like to buy a piece of property. This looks like my goal, so I'll pay $1. And I get to move this. Well, what do I want to do with this? He cut me off from this one and is going to get there earlier than I am. So I'm going to make him pay to get that. I feel kind of like green is annoying me over there. Okay. That puts us to red. What's red's deal? Well, red's got these foremen. I want to make sure I get to use my ability. This is always a problem, is that danger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my disc over on the butcher. I'm going to grab 4 orange cubes. And remember, I can exchange 2 of them for gray ones when we get down to the administration phase. And I lose my foreman for this. Okay. What do we got here? We've got grain coming in. Orange factories produce more. We'd like to start building up towards an orange factory. You know what? We're going to work on the butcher as well, and we'll take 2 orange cubes. The problem is we can't really guarantee we're going to get this sucker. Because if we are the ones who take the dollar for it, we're not likely to get it. You know, the next guy's going to say, yeah, I'd like a factory. That brings us over to him. He also wants to get some work order cubes. He doesn't really need money. Money's not a big deal right now. So he's going to throw it into the bakery, I guess. And that's our second. He's got a weird situation because he could grab the sawmill, which is a higher level. It makes more money for each thing it produces. But it gets him less laborers. You know what? Yeah, but he's already got an orange piece there. And the industry boss is only a one-time thing. So he wouldn't necessarily be producing more gray. The only thing we're guaranteed is there will be more orange available. So now here on the third, our farmer. Well, we have to plant our seed, but there's another issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab up land. This may or may not be a good idea, but I've grabbed this. What do I want to close out? If there's anywhere where there's a race, I think it is... I don't know. I think it's down here that I want one. Okay. And that means I'm not going to be doing any industry type stuff. I'm just going to be generating farm goods. All right. What about this guy? Is a buck worthwhile? You know, this is the hard thing. Do I even want a damn buck? Or is there something else I can do? Well, I could grab some more orange cubes. I don't really need those. But what I don't have is property. I want to carve out some space with property. You want to make sure I don't get left behind. So I'll put a buck down. I'll grab this space. I get to put this somewhere. It must be somewhere. Try to clog green off from there. Okay. Black. I would like to get a factory. I'm not going to get a factory. I have, plenty of money. I too will buy property then, because I'm in danger of getting completely cut off. And we'll throw this, green's close to that. They may pay, but yeah, all right. And that puts it to our industry boss. I'm just going to grab one. Which one do I want to grab? So this is an interesting choice. Do I want to grab the one that there's more of? Or, that people have worked harder on? Or do I want to grab this one? See, what happens if I grab this one? This one's got a chance of going over, and then there would be no gray. Of course, we can look at what's coming up, and there's going to be, other stuff showing up. I don't know. I've got orange produce, so I obviously want to grab an orange space. The real question is, do I want other people, and by the way, all this counter mix is limited, so like if the orange cubes all go, I don't get any more. Question is, do I want to make people able to take this or not? I'm going to just grab this one because other people have worked on getting it. They get their chips back. I get this. That's my industry boss action. But I have to place a factory. Now I'm green. I'll put a factory here next to blue because it kind of downgrades this property value or something. It doesn't have any effect on play. Okay. And that's got to take a location. So now we're back around to blue. And what's blue up to? Blue's got a lot. Blue's got a farm. We'll grow some crops. And that's my action. And I've used the farmer essentially there, but red. Red has, oh, this is here now. Red has very little that they can do in terms of excitement. Are they interested in either porcelain or telegraph? That's always an interesting idea. I could just move that forward. And this is where I'm a little concerned maybe I don't get the rules. There's a possibility you'd have to pay, that by my reading of the rules, you'd have to pay $1 to move that a space. That only your first placement on the board is free. So what are we saying? Porcelain and telegraph gives an extra orange work order. And if I own pottery, I have an advantage. And what was the other one? Telegraph. Just trying to see if either of these are really interesting. All white factories produce 2 goods. Receive a victory point if you have the hotel. Neither of those sound all that impressive. Whereas grabbing land is kind of appealing. And I've got a lot of land available to me. I'm going to pay $2. Drop this here. I get these. And I can make life kind of difficult. I can make life kind of difficult on the 2 sides. And now I've kind of made half the board, not mine, but hard for other people to get to. Of course, they can blast into there for $3 and move the money in my direction, which would suck. But right, okay. Brings us to black. What's black up to? I'm getting grain. All my orange factories get 2 worker orders. I'd really like to work towards an orange factory. This one's going to disappear. This one already produces 2. I'm interested in the weaving mill. I know that's available later. All right. Let's see if we can get the weaving mill. It'll show up on the board anyway at some point, but we'll put 2 of these out here. Now, we're working on one that's going to be destroyed if somebody doesn't, nobody's going to buy it. Yeah, I'm just getting cubes. I'll do this one instead, just to get myself more cubes. Okay. Now, over here, this guy's got the butcher. He wants to produce. Or he wants to expand. Producing will only get him $1. That's kind of not worthwhile. I could tax or something else for that crappy. So we'll buy some property. And the property went faster than I expected it to. Which property do we need? Well, this is a 2-space property that we get right away. This would be a 1-space that's next to a 2-space, and we probably won't get it. So we'll grab this one for 3. We'll put... I can put them all here if I want. Yeah, we're going to block red off. We don't like what he just did. I guess. And that is the end of 4 rounds of this, which means we go to the administrative phase. Now, producing would have been of some value because I'd get victory points off that. Whenever you produce, each cube you produce gives you a victory point. Oh, somebody built a factory. That was green, so he actually gets 2 victory points for that. Okay. All right. So, anyone with harvest grain markers gets back additional ones. These come from the return area first. So that's him. He's going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 additional grain. So he just maxed out on his grain. Nobody else is harvesting. But, and this is going to be hard to remember, the seed drill gets him an extra grain. And this is, I'm going to have real trouble. You know, I had enough trouble playing opposed, remembering what my cards were doing, because I tended to pick up a lot of technology. And boy, it's going to be tough. Just like things like I did Through the Ages recently. These games where they have lots of little special ability cards, always a tough time for me. Okay. The lowest numbered face-up factory card goes away. That's this one. And I can just put it over in the box. That happens every turn. And whenever a factory comes out of here, a new one shows up. Okay. And had anybody produced, their markers would go back in the pools. Now we count the citizens. Well, nobody has more than 1 house, so everybody's at a limit of 1 citizen. And everybody gets 2 victory points because they all have 1 citizen. Nobody went to increase their population. Increasing your population is rough unless you have a good reason for it, because you have a limited amount of grain. Now let me make sure about production, that population doesn't affect production, which kind of disturbs me. Yeah. So you can produce in every factory you have. It's not affected by your population. I don't know what the population really represents. They're just people who are eating your grain, basically. Okay. Speaking of which, everybody's got to feed their people. And that's going to be 1 grain each. And you can see the players who did not generate grain are now in a rough spot. And these go back in the return pile. Now everybody gets 1 for every 3 grain that they have. Well, that's 2 victory points for blue. Now, there are more than 2 grain markers per player in the return area. That would be 3, 6, 7. There are not, so these don't get refilled. So we're beginning to see some shortages because he's sucked up all the grain. And now we advance the game turn marker. And we have to figure out who the mayor is. Now, we have a tie for least victory points. Whoever has the least money, and then whoever's clockwise, but we do counterclockwise. So $7 for black. Looks like less money for red. So red will become the mayor. And as sort of a consolation prize, the catch-up, and this is really big in 2 players, gets a victory point. The goal in the game in 2 players early on was to be the mayor, at least an important goal, because you got this bonus victory point that you didn't have to work for. So you could set up other things, like, you know, dominating the grain, which could give you victory points, but maybe you could get less victory points that way than other choices. As we see, though, that's been successful at getting the lead in victory points in this one. All right, I'll be back with the next turn. And really, you know, that was one turn. We only have 6 of these suckers. Like many Euros, it's a fairly short game, but it does get much more complicated as these technologies come out. They're an optional role, but there you have it. Hit the second turn. Back in the administrative phase, I forgot this guy. I took care of everybody else's, I think, their advantages. But this guy is able to change 2 orange cubes for 2 gray cubes. He's going to do that. He doesn't know what he's going to have. And, you know, he'll probably have some gray. So that's kind of appealing. All the jobs are back in play. The mayor gets to pick first. Actions start over here with the mayor. He took the professor. He's not terribly interested in the next set, but these two, the traction engine and the kerosene lamp, are kind of nice. The traction engine makes grain cheap, no matter where you buy it from. And, of course, he still probably wants to buy it from the cheaper places. Although, there's something weird you can do with this. Normally, you can't. Normally, you sell grain at the cheapest possible price. But he could actually use the traction engine and choose to buy the grain out of the field at $1 each and then sell it back to the field for $3. So there's a way to make money off grain. One of the things I'm looking at with blue, and this is what I learned in the first game and why I didn't take it in the second, is you really can't make grain your money-making engine. But maybe with the mechanized farming you can. The other one that's interesting is the kerosene lamp, which the telegraph's interesting too. It gives you 2 goods when you choose produce goods with white factories. But the kerosene lamp allows you, let's see, your gray factories produce 2 goods. And right now white's not really available, but gray might be. The problem, of course, is he may not get a factory. As we saw, you know, somebody's got to want that buck. Money's usually not all that rare, so it's hard for somebody to make that decision. Often the reason that they want that decision is that they want to grab a factory and they don't think anyone else is going to grab it. But in 4 players, that seems really unlikely, so it's kind of a hard action to use. In 2 players, it's often the case where you don't think somebody else really particularly wants the factory that much to waste an action on it. But here I don't know about that. Industry boss, he needs a factory, right? You know, and this is the easy way to get it. In particular, he wants the weaving mill, which gets him an extra victory point, so at the end of the game. So, you know, what the hell. Over here, the mill worker, he's got no grain. This allows him to buy grain for free. But it still takes an action. And so that's only like $2 that he's gaining. But he's a little short on cash because he made a big land purchase. And that left blue with something awesome, the foreman, which is a pretty potent card. So we go over to red. They have the professor. Now, in terms of time sensitivity, there's 2 things that are important right now. One is land purchasing. It might be important for me to grab one of these 2, but, you know, I'm going to see if somebody else is moving towards them. So I'm going to actually use my professor ability. I'm going to pay $1. That leaves me $3 to buy the land if I need to. Grab the 2 cards that I want using my ability. And you can already see technology as a path for other players is becoming much, much less valuable. Black, who took the original one, professor, you know, he's going to get something if he only grabs the iron plow. That's pretty cool. And in fact, that's what he's going to do at this point. Well, I don't know. The iron plow is not terribly good. It only works if you're going to be planting. He's got the seed drill. He doesn't really need another one. Receive an orange work order during factories. 2 points if you have pottery. And telegraph doesn't look terribly valuable either. I don't know if I really want technology. I don't know if I really need to grab my factory yet. All of your factories produce 2 work orders when you choose the produced goods. Yeah. See, we could end up with 2 factories if we do things well. And we're going to need gray goods in order to run the weaving mill. So we'll grab that. And we'll see what happens, because we've got the industry boss. We do have enough territory to drop a couple of factories into play. Another thing we might want to do is grab some land before somebody else takes it. But it doesn't look like this is terribly threatened right now. Over to green. Well, green needs to do a grain action at some point, but we would kind of like to increase our work order. Now, see, citizens are a weird thing, population, because they're just victory points, but they're a decent amount of victory points each turn. The problem is you have to be generating grain, and that's kind of a tough thing to do. You know, I mean, obviously, with the mill worker, I have enough grain to run 2 people. So, you know, I could build houses, and I have work orders, and this, that, and the other. So I would like to also work towards a business, unless there's a technology I terribly want. I feel like I've already, you know, gone down that route. All right, we'll take a gray work order as well. And see. And again, I don't know what these work orders mean. All right, the foreman. Well, we could take a buck. We're low on cash. It's not a terrible option. And what's really ugly is this guy gets a point for the weaving mill, and maybe I'm taking it away from him by playing here. Of course, how much do I really need that buck? Would I rather grab lots of work orders? Pottery will be available if something else goes. I'm going to grab a buck because I like money, you know, whatever. All right, that pushes it past the first. Second is over here. Now, we could keep running down the technology. We've got telephone and sewing machine. How are these? Sewing machine, if I have the textile factory, is worth something. And orange goods make more money. Ooh. Wow. And what's the other one? The telephone. A white order per turn, and you get 2 points if you have the law firm, which is buried somewhere inside, which I don't know if I can take. On the other hand, I can grab a business. I'll grab the business. I'm not sure it's the best move, but it does dick someone else over. And there's always an advantage to that. That gets me a factory. I am red. I'll put it over here near blue. And remember, what is it? 2 victory points for building a factory, right? Yeah. Not that that's necessarily good. You don't necessarily want to be, you don't want to be in the lead in victory points. But last place in a 4-player game, the catch-up's not as big a deal as in a 2-player game. So I don't know. Okay. That puts us over to black. And black's like, screwed, man. I didn't get what I wanted. And now I have a gray production. Oh gosh. Well. Pottery comes with porcelain. We're going to grab this using our ability. Over here. Do I want to produce? I don't really get much. I've got a gray. Let's grab a couple more orange. Yeah. Let's grab a couple more orange cubes here. See what happens. Puts us to blue. Well, this is blue's time to get Mondo cubes, I think. So we're going to use this to grab 4 cubes. Ah, we can't. The orange cubes are all used up. Well, we'll hold then. What do we want to do if that's the case? We have some cash now. We could threaten taking this and force something to happen. We could go for some technology. There's not a lot that we can really do here. We could grab a couple of gray cubes. Technology is getting expensive. This is my free space. $1, $2. $1 gives me the stupid iron plow. $2 gives me free cube or a bonus for the white. Pottery is already in someone's hands. The hotel is not. All right. $2 for a technology. It puts me in the race where I can keep playing in technology. All right. I don't really like this, but I'll grab the telegraph. I could have grabbed the porcelain, giving me free work orders. That's kind of cool too. But this gives me a goal in the long run. And that should have been the second time around. Okay, third time. This is nice. So I get good production. I need to buy grain before, before the turn ends. Otherwise my people starve. And, well, they move away. And I need to do something else, I guess. I'm going to need to produce to get some cash. So I will produce first. And now the kerosene lamp lets me produce gray. Now this is an interesting thing. So what I said before is you have to produce the full amount. Well, I think if you have a technology, it kind of screws you in the sense that you have to produce the 2. But that gets me $4. A nice windfall. As I said, money can be gotten. And that's my action. Over here. This doesn't really help me. I have the pottery. I want to get the thing that goes with pottery. That's going to cost me $1 as I jump over and grab the porcelain. This will give me an orange work order during admin. So I'm getting grain and an orange work order. That's kind of cool. Up here, we need our grain. We haven't done a production yet. Should we get $1? Do we have anything else we really need or want to do? And now, with 3 people up here, green is kind of cut out. He's going to say, I'm not in the technology game, but other people may have to pay more to fight for that. So by the guy who's not doing it, hey, maybe I come out ahead. I'm going to do a purchase grain and a dump this. That gets me 2 grain. I'll buy 2 more. The 2 cheap grain. I don't know where my free grain from the mill worker comes from. Sometimes this tells me more. From the field. This is the field. Okay. So we got ourselves, you know, some padding in the food. Yeah, we paid and we're out of money, but that's okay. And now blue here, I still haven't done the work order. There still aren't orange cubes for me. I got a buck. I could jump ahead to telephone or sewing machine if I want. What are those? I get free white dudes. And what was the other one? Sewing machine. Earn $2 for orange. I'm going to jump ahead again. I'm going to grab the telephone. As I'm really kind of going for the whites now. Now, of course, I'm out of money, you know. And that's the third. And now, let's finish this up with red. Red has something they have to do. They have to buy grain. All right, how much grain do I want? I can buy 7. And I can buy it from wherever I like. Let's not buy grain often. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm owed a buck. I can only buy 6. That's fine. I was considering keeping a buck anyway. Because who knows. And that puts me at the end of his turn. Over here, I'd like some money, I guess. It's almost always a good idea to produce. There's not much I can actually get here other than some cash. So I'll produce 2 of these. This guy red gets 2 victory points for producing, and black gets 2 victory points for producing 2 cubes. And I gotta give him his money. Okay. Over to green. Green has possibility of producing a buck. I could produce some orange cubes. I don't really have a whole hell of a lot of good options available to me. Let's look at the options available. Land, buildings, trade grains, sow seeds. Maybe I want to sow seeds. I only have 2 that I'd be growing. Be 2 more grain for free. It's a couple of bucks, I guess. I don't know. I could tax. That would get me a buck. There's not a lot. Not a lot I can do. I suppose I'll produce a work order. This is so minor. I'm getting a victory point and a buck. I guess that's better than 2 bucks for sowing grain or something, but it does not feel like I'm in a good position here. Going last on that first turn definitely hurt, just position-wise and choice-wise, and maybe I've made some bad decisions. Over here, I have not used my foreman, and I'd better use them, right? So there are still no oranges because they don't flush. I'm never going to get those oranges this turn. My foreman was kind of a bone for that. Sawmill's going to disappear, so in the interest of progress, we'll take those. And yeah, I wasn't really considering the fact that orange wasn't going to come through with anything. All right, now we look at the ordering. Administration, harvest, nobody planted grain. Factories, lowest numbered factory goes away and is replaced. By a coal mine. Okay. Hey, there's the bank. Somebody wants the bank. Not him. I don't know. Somebody wanted the bank. Don't they? be something white. Oh. Thought somebody won at the bank. All right. All these markers go back. And we've given out the victory points this time for them. Count your citizens. Well, everybody's still at 1. Yippee-ki-yay, everybody gets 2 victory points. Okay. Now everybody's got to feed just 1. Harvest, he produced 1. He got an orange work order, which I think there was 1 available. I don't know who I've drawn food from. I drew 3 food. Oh, because he produced 1. Where does that come from? Okay, we have to look up the seed drill again. In here, yeah, it doesn't say. I'm going to say from the return pile. I don't know if that's correct. It unfortunately doesn't say. Okay, so we fed our people. Now we get 1 for every 3 grain. Blue gets 2 victory points. Red gets 1. Green gets 1. Okay. So you make money without, or you make victory points without selling your grain or anything, which is kind of cool. Barn refill. If more than 2 per player are in the return area. Okay, we got 2 extra. We return them first to the field, 1 per player. Okay. So, you know, there's less cheap grain available. It makes sense in terms of supply and demand. The problem is when you sell, they automatically sell at the cheap price first, right? And, or maybe you can sell where you like. Let's see. From right to left, first the barns. Yeah, so you fill these up, and basically the first things you're selling when the demand is at its highest are the cheapest things. You know, the economic model works in the wrong direction. It just doesn't make sense. Power grids is a lot more reasonable where, you know, hey, there's a big demand for these, they're expensive. Not, hey, you're meeting most of the demand and now you can get more money. There's a lot in this model. You know, whatever model's under this doesn't make any sense. It's more about the game than anything else. And I guess that means the turn marker goes up to turn 3. This video is going up. We have to look. Black's got the least victory points, so they will be getting the mayor and the victory point with that. And I've positioned all the cards back. Everything's set, and it's time to send things up. And it's kind of cool to see the technologies. So when you're playing with less players, not only do you play with less board, but you play with less of these, which keeps it to, it kind of runs out at 6 turns. What you don't play with less of is less technologies. And it's weird because some of the technologies refer to businesses that don't even exist in less than 4 players. So I'm just not sure, you know, the technology is as well integrated into the player reduction efforts that the game has. All right, let's send this up.